Hi everyone, welcome back. I have made myself a cup of tea this morning and I thought I would do another book video and we could just talk about the books that I've read over February and March. School has really picked up, if you've seen from some other videos like from the midterms week and stuff like that. I have not honestly had that much time to do any leisure reading, but I've been trying and there have been, some reads here and there that I've really enjoyed. So this video is actually going to be pretty short. There's only 4 books, but I thought all of them were really cool and I would definitely recommend them. So hopefully it's still enjoyable. I was doubting if I should really make this, but I think even for me it's really fun to look back on like what books I thought were really good and what sorts of thoughts I had at the moment. So I decided it'd be worth it. So yeah, let's just hop right into it. So the first book I read in February was called Where Reasons End by Yin Lee. Actually, fun fact, Yin Lee was my professor for creative writing last semester, so it was really cool. It's the first time I was reading any one of her books. This book is definitely not light reading. It's a book written by Lee after she lost her son to suicide, and the whole book is kind of construed as a series of conversations between a mother and a son in this like really vague space between life and death. They really just kind of talk about all sorts of things, very normal things of the day-to-day, but then also like obviously go into sort of more painful or deeper topics around the son and the mother's relationship and the son's choice of suicide and stuff like that. What I appreciated a lot was that I feel like when it comes to topics such as like losing a child or just grief in general, the ways in which we kind of talk about them, especially like write about them, tend to be pretty cliche or kind of like there's sort of a prescribed like idea of how to write about grief. And I felt like this book like totally did not listen to that and was very like, it just didn't feel forced at all, and it didn't feel like unnatural or anything like I'd seen before. It actually really felt like a much more honest portrayal of the grief that is very complicated that a parent might feel after losing a child. This book was probably like the most beautiful book that I've ever read about grief and kind of those meditations on how grief is a very complicated feeling. It's very rarely simple, and Lee's writing is so incredible. So it's very simple and easy to read, but there were just so many moments where I was like, how did she perfectly encapsulate that feeling or that sensation into like this really short like sentence or a couple of words? And I feel like that's like the true proof of like a really good writer, is just that they're able to condense these really complicated or like very specific feelings into like one sentence and you kind of know exactly what they're talking about. That just lent this real like honesty to the book and I really enjoyed it. I definitely feel like it's a little bit of a slower read, not necessarily that it's hard to read, but more so that it's kind of like a little slower paced, I think. And there's not particularly obviously like a huge plot or anything, but I feel like even, despite that, the writing and the way that it was talking about the topics that it dealt with was just such a beautiful rendition. So whenever you feel like you're in kind of a more meditative or sort of slower mood, I would definitely recommend it. And I ended up giving it 3.5 stars on Storygraph, which is kind of where I've been logging all of my reviews and stuff, and I'll link that down below just in case you're curious or want to check it out. So the next book is called Hamnet and it's by Maggie O'Farrell. And I actually, if you watched my previous January video, I talked about watching Jack Edwards, who's obviously a very famous booktuber, his video of like the best books of 2021. And this was on his list as well. And I really enjoyed Piranesi and I think Open Water, which were both on his list. And so I decided, I'm just gonna give his list a try. I ended up reading it on Kindle, and to be totally honest, like that always kind of like hinders my reading experience, but I think I'm very much still like a paperback person. The premise is so cool. It's about William Shakespeare, but it never mentions him by name. It's actually more about the people around him in his life. So it's about his wife and his children. It's basically centered around a fictional reimagining of his son Hamnet's death, of which a lot of people speculate is like the reason he wrote the play Hamlet, which has obviously a very similar name. Yeah, it really is not about him or his writing or his art at all. It's much more about the development of the characters of his family and their kind of relationships. I just thought it was incredibly built. For me, I feel like historical fiction and fantasy like live in a very similar space of like you just have to really know what you're doing with the world around you, and she totally does. Like, it was incredible. It really came totally to life, and I just love the way she writes. It's so easy to read, and it's like perfectly descriptive to the point where you're kind of being able to picture everything and know what's going on, but like it's not heavy-handed or like aggressive. Like, these really beautiful metaphors or descriptions of setting, or even the characters were a little bit more kind of like, I don't know, they just felt like such like classic book characters. I don't know if this is making sense, but like I felt like I was almost reading something that I would have read like in elementary or middle school, like that vibe of like this world that kind of like completely takes you in, but it had like the depth and language and whatever of like just a normal read. I think it's so cool how many fictional liberties she took and just like completely ran with. Like, I don't think that this is a honest portrayal of Shakespeare's actual biography or story, but like that makes it almost cooler. And overall, I would definitely recommend it. It was a slower read. It's really big. It's a thick book, and I feel like I wasn't super invested in like this Shakespeare part of the story, or just kind of like this Anglophile kind of, like I didn't have that initial interest going into it. So I think that might affect just how long it'll stick with me. Like, I think it was just a really fun read when I read it, and I don't know if it's going to have like any longer lasting impact, but I definitely still encourage you to check it out. And I gave it 3.5 stars again on Storygraph. Okay, so the next book is Weather by Jenny Offel, and I loved this book. I thought it was so cool. This book is unlike anything I've ever read before, and it's really hard to like kind of narrow it down into like a premise or just like even a plot or what it's talking about, but it's told from the view of a college librarian. I think she's like maybe in her 30s, like going on 40 or something, lives with her husband and is raising her son. And it's a really interesting series of like snippets and meditations and like little scenes of her living her life, raising her child, like the daily kind of encounters and challenges, while all being against like kind of like this subtle like underlying anxiety and backdrop of climate change, hence I think the name Weather. No description can really do the book justice for me. It's really directly obviously grappling with climate change, but like not in a preachy or kind of even like overt way at all that I've seen other books kind of do, but it's more so the way that the book is written. It kind of taps into this tone of the low-grade anxiety and uncertainty and uneasiness that a lot of our generation feels and a lot of people feel just in everyday life right now because of climate anxiety. How there's this also constant struggle between like, I am able to make a change and I should like recycle, try to go zero waste, etc., whatever, and then also like accepting that this is just totally out of our hands personally, and it's really just something that has gone already too far and like won't change unless governments and corporations make their like actual changes. And I just thought it was really cool because she just expresses in writing so well, like without being like obvious about it, how these like huge scale like anxieties and worries like kind of weave in and out of also just our very small personal everyday worries and like, or just like triumphs. I just found all of those aspects like really enjoyable, and the writing is really easy to read. It's really short, and also like at times it's so funny. Like, I literally just kind of laughed out loud at certain moments. So I read the whole book in a couple of days, which honestly with schoolwork and with everything like is really rare, and it feels so good when it happens. So it went by really fast, and I think if you just want like a really fast read that'll also be kind of meaningful and make you think, I would totally recommend it, and I think it'll go by really quickly. And so I gave that a 4.5 on Storygraph. So the last book I want to talk about, and the only one that I actually have with me, is After Parties by Anthony Villas-Nassau. First of all, just look at this cover. It's so beautiful. Oh, incredible. But yeah, so I lead a Asian American book club on campus, and this was our pick for March, so we're going to be talking about it in the next week or so. I actually learned about the author of this book before I actually learned about the book itself, and that's because I think he was quite kind of like a literary like rising star, and he passed away a couple years ago, I think at the age of like 28, and so it was a really big deal, I guess, within like the literary community, and I read about it kind of on like the New York Times and stuff, and so I knew about him, and I knew that people thought he was like a really talented writer who had a lot of potential, and then I saw that this book had come out, and I was so excited to read it. After reading this collection of short stories, I understand why this was such a like huge loss for the, I think, art in general. His writing is like unbelievable. It's incredible. It's probably some of the best that I've ever seen, and at least in terms of writing about Asian American identity, I just love the way he approaches it and goes about it. I think it's really refreshing, and all of his stories are like really easy to read. The voice is incredible, like they're so funny, and he has this way of like weaving these kind of bigger questions and realizations about identity, gender, class, like all of these like really big topics into just like very normal life, and a couple of characters that feel like super real and like totally alive, and I think that is like so rare and unique. Sorry, my memory card was full, but I'm back. Sometimes I feel like I read a short story collection or a novel or whatever, and I'm like, okay, the characters were really cool, I was vibing with the writing or whatever, but I honestly don't know if this has any larger meaning, or like I'm not really sure why I read it or like what I learned from it, and I felt like that was totally not here. And other times you read something where it feels very like purposefully meaningful, like it's trying to push a message, but then like the actual like plot or writing is like not that interesting, and I felt like he does just this incredible job of like combining both of those to make sure that you are invested in the characters, like you're really invested in the plot, but then you also kind of walk away with something more. And yeah, just every story is so readable. They all kind of connect together in this really cool way. They're all set in like Stockton, California, in his Cambodian American community, and it just feels so alive, and I really appreciated it. I read it over spring break in the brief like pause I got between midterms and now, and I am so excited to talk about it And honestly, I personally I'm just so inspired by his writing as well. I'm so sad that we don't actually have that much more of his writing to see. But anything else that kind of comes from the vault, I will totally be reading, and I really highly recommend this. I would also buy it if you can, like it is so beautiful. And I gave this a 4.5 on Storygraph. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. So like I said, I didn't get around to reading that much the past 2 months, but here's to hoping that the next couple of months are better. I hope that this was somewhat interesting to you. I know in the last book video I got some comments that people wanted to see them again, so I'm here, I'm delivering what the people want. And yeah, I hope it was interesting. I hope you got some good recommendations out of it, and I will see you in the next one.